Now, here's a story that literally I was looking at on the program yesterday. It seems to have developed, and I really want to talk about it because I don't quite understand it, and I hope that you can help, and hope that our guests can also help. One of the largest councils in the country will now include the title, MX or mix, as an option on their paperwork, as well as the traditional Mr., Miss and Mrs. There also used to be a Ms, didn't there? Oxford City Council made the change following recommendations from the council's Equality and Diversity Group as a way of making the council more inclusive. Does it make sense to you, or am I already talking gobbledygook? Right. Mixed does not denote any gender and so provides an option for those who do not identify as either male or female. Here in London, the Green Party Assembly member Sian Berry has said London Council should stop asking people their gender altogether. So I talked to Joe Good about it. Well, not strictly about it. She mentioned girls and men, and I talked about, what does it mean and all of that, and she said she didn't like it when people at her age, she's just over 60 I believe, because she has the freedom pass. How unkind of me to mention that. Please don't tell her that I did. She didn't take kindly to people presuming that she was a Mrs. because of her age. But will the rest of the country follow suit? Is Oxford leading the way? And do you care what you're called, how you're described? And gender, how important is it in terms of description to you? Join me now, David Vance, political commentator and editor of the online blog The Tangled Web, and Tara Hewitt, a diversity consultant. Might I start with you, David? Good afternoon to you.
Hello there, Eddie.
You've tweeted, haven't you, that this is madness. Why?
Well, the fact of the matter is that here we have, in this particular council, a Labour-run council, Eddie, let's call it for what it is, who seem to think that this is a priority issue for them, that it's worth wasting time to create something that actually doesn't exist. We're either male or we're female. That's it. And I don't see why this should be such a massive problem. If people want to identify in other ways, well, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. But, I don't see why, on the basis of the fact that an infinitesimally small amount of people have confusion on their gender, the gender then is essentially, as was the original case here, Eddie, they considered removal of all gender because that caused problems, and the replacement of Mr. and Mrs. with mix.
But does it matter how many people are affected? Surely, so long as people are affected, it's incumbent upon any community, any society, to make it as inclusive as possible. But
this inclusiveness, and it does come from the equalities and diversity spectrum.
Yeah, you keep saying it like it's a pejorative. It's not to everybody, Dave.
Well, I'm saying that to suggest that there is a group now called mix is a fantasy. It's a kind of neo-Marxist delusion that doesn't exist in the real world, because unfortunately for everyone, Eddie, they are either male or they're female. There are many people who would be very offended if they couldn't identify as Mr. and Mrs. And I'm suggesting to you that that's about 99.9%. Now, why should the 99.9% be inconvenienced to accommodate this illusionary 0.01%? I find that very strange. I also find it essentially an attack on the essence of the family, which is Mr. and Mrs. And Miss. That's another aspect.
Well, the family isn't Mr. and Mrs. as well. You know that the family can be whatever you want it to be. I'll come back to you, David. I'd like to bring Tara in. Tara, good day to you, and thanks so much for joining us in this conversation.
Hi, Eddie.
What's the significance of an extra box on a form?
I think it's really important that we make people feel that they're included. However small that group is within society. If you look at the religion boxes that we have on forms, we have lots of different religions, even religions where there's only a small number of those communities in our local community. But we try to make a space to say, actually, if that's how you identify, and if that's who you are, that you're able to disclose that and be included. And that's what Oxford Council are trying to do. I think some of the headlines have been a bit misleading in terms of replacing Mr. and Mrs. with MX with mix.
Is it like having Mr. Mrs. Ms? Is it like that?
Yeah.
Is that how you take it?
adding another field to make sure that people feel included. And I think there's two aspects to it. One, that you're not alienating a group of people that at the moment don't feel that they can identify as how they identify. But secondly, it's making sure any information we're collecting for official purposes.
How do you react to what David has said then, personally?
I think starting off by saying this is about a Labour council and Marxism, which goes off on a tangent. Nicky Morgan, when she was the Women and Equalities Minister, committed the government to reviewing gender markers and an internal review of all gender markers on official documents. It's government policy that these reviews are going to take place in government. So
well, a review doesn't mean that it's going to change, does it?
It doesn't, but the recommendation of the Women's Equalities Select Committee, chaired by Maria Miller, was that it should change. Okay. And Nicky Morgan's response is that the government would review that to look at how they would look at implementing that recommendation. So I think it's clear that this isn't just a single council. This isn't a niche issue that's being pushed by a small number of people. This is something that has been analysed by a select committee in Parliament, is being implemented. It's working really well in Brighton. Brighton introduced this policy in 2013, where we haven't seen any big negative stories about this not working in Brighton and the family being disillusioned and people feeling excluded. Actually, if you ask people feel included in Brighton, and the trans community, who are often the people that feel excluded from official documentation, would describe the work that's happening in councils like Brighton and hopefully now in Oxford as taking a step forward and leading on this. And I hope my council up in Manchester are taking note, and this is something that...
How do you describe yourself?
I mean, I'm a trans woman. I transitioned when I was at university. I fit myself within a gender binary. I don't identify as non-binary myself, but I think whoever we are, that we listen to people that say that they're excluded. And actually, if there are people telling us that they're excluded, I can't experience that myself, and David can't experience that. They're telling us they're excluded. If it doesn't hurt us to add a box onto the form, why wouldn't we do it?
I'll let you get your second bit out. Let me just bring David back in. I mean, we can have them both up, actually, and have this as a three-way conversation. David, if it doesn't exclude, affect or offend anybody in terms of adding another box, then what's the problem with it?
Because on this basis, where do you stop? I mean, do you go the Facebook approach, Eddie, and add 39 different genders? I mean, you know, at what...
No. Deal with the question that's being asked, David. Don't take it off on another tangent. It's another... Well, you've already got Mr., Mrs. and Mix.
I try to finish one...
No, but you're taking it off on a tangent. I'm trying to keep it here. It's a Mr., Mrs. and a Miss. If you add another box, what do you lose is the question.
Reality, that's what you lose. And so if I can just sort of illuminate that point a little bit, we are, whether Tara or others like it or not, we are either male or we are female. Mr., Mrs. and Ms. seems to have managed to sort of tick all the boxes, if you'll pardon the pun, for a very long time in our history. And now what we have is, and again to contradict Tara, we have extreme left-wingists on Oxford Council and in Brighton, which was mentioned as well. And this is what the left does, Eddie. It seeks to undermine the traditional...
Well, no, it doesn't. You're making it about politics.
Contradicting me, Eddie, but you didn't contradict Tara.
Well, I have. I've asked... I said to her that a review doesn't necessarily mean that it was going to be implemented or that it was right.
Of her core point that mix is a sensible form of gender.
How many times have you been on this show, Dave? You know what the plan is. You and I talk about it and we engage in a conversation. Today you seem really defensive about our conversation. Okay, you talk then.
Relaxed and chilled, Eddie. I'm simply pointing out that your interruptions of me are multiple. Your interruptions of Tara were one. Now, you know, if you want to have a conversation, let's have a conversation. And my point on this is that not a question of being defensive, but if really if this is a priority for the political left, and let's face it, this is where it's coming from, then that's why, Eddie, they are utterly unelectable as a government in perpetuity. If this is the big issue for them in 2016, I would suggest that the vast majority of people listening to this and the vast majority of people in the country would say, well, you know something, we've got more important things to worry about than trying to accommodate those who think that they should be able to identify as mixed.
That's why I interrupt you, because what Tara's done is talked about an individual and being inclusive. And what you are doing, sir, with all due respect, is talking about left, about being electable. How would you describe Tara?
have no idea. I've not.
Well, you said there's male and there's female. I'm asking you. Tara's now said I'm a transgender woman. How would you describe Tara?
I'm not a doctor, but I would suggest that Tara is either male or Tara is either female, Eddie.
Okay, thanks so much, David. Appreciate it. Tara, I just want to end with you. I don't know really if it's systematic of the type of resistance that any movement will face because it becomes politicised, or it is an essential objection to something being forced which doesn't include what we traditionally take to be the norm. How do you see it?
I think it's just often it's a misunderstanding of information, and people need to taking strong positions without going in to learn more about it. I mean, I think discussing, hearing David talk there, that there's just male or female, all the evidence shows that that's not true. We've seen in the Olympics, for example, around the discussion of intersex athletes and looking at hormones within sports. We know there's over 18 different sexual issues around someone's sex, that it's previously been called sexual development disorders, but prefer to be called as intersex conditions, that lead to people actually not fitting within the boundaries that society imposes on people. So the idea of non-binary is just an evolution of that principle that gender isn't as simplistic as maybe we've always been taught it is. And if people are telling us that they're feeling like society doesn't make them included within it, and it doesn't harm anybody else to include them by adding a box.
But it's a slip. But I think they see it as a slippery slope into nothingness, where they have felt safe, and I don't think David is exclusive in this. In understanding that this is what a traditional home is, this is what a role is, this is what my purpose is, and anything and anybody that challenges that would have to come under scrutiny. Do you understand that?
I totally, and it's the argument that's been put forward across so many different changes. We could go back to the equal marriage discussion, and when that argument was put forward, people went, this is what would happen. It's a slippery slope. It would lead to marriage, not the family unit being challenged, and all of our values not working. But when we go and look at where equal marriage had been put in place in other countries, that it didn't lead to that. We've had equal marriage now in this country, and we haven't led to the family, to all of a sudden the sense of family being got rid of. And in the terms of including trans people within forms, I gave an example of a council that's been doing it for over 3 years. The world hasn't self-destructed. We haven't seen mass protests about it. We haven't seen newspaper stories. In fact, I was commenting yesterday with another radio station who was saying, Oxford were the first. I had to point out that Brighton had actually done this because it had been such a non-story.
Yeah, but I am forced to tell you, Brighton wouldn't they? Because if you expect anybody to do it, it would be Brighton.
Which is why I use Nicky Morgan and Maria Miller as an example as well. It's broader than that. I think there's people on the fringes that are challenging it, but actually if we're looking at mainstream politics and mainstream commentators, David's views are probably in a minority.
You reckon? I don't know. I don't know about that. I mean, we're going to go and talk about it now. I wonder if David Vance's views are in a minority. I'm guessing that we're going to take some calls now that will indicate, if on this show at least, whether they are. Tara, thank you. David, before you, thank you. This is BBC Radio London. What are your thoughts, please? 020 722 42,000. Let's get those headlines from Will.